Hello. This is my presentation. I am sorry that my video was kind of small in the corner. Tried to get it not to do that. Don't know why it's doing that. Hopefully you can see me good enough. Also, I'm sorry that it's a little dark in my room. My lamp just broke, sadly. So yes, my presentation. So yes, for my research question, I chose ADHD as a positive thing. And so I titled the presentation, ADHD, a Cause for Success. So my personal struggle with ADHD. Quite a few years ago, I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I viewed it as a real hindrance to me, something holding me back. While I was always a good student, I had some problem focusing and remembering assignments or concepts. That was something that was very difficult for me. Whenever I started to struggle in school, I'd quite often blame ADHD. So all these factors really led to me being frustrated, so frustrated with my disorder and just viewing it as a very negative thing. And this is largely in part to societal views. Society mostly views ADHD as a very negative thing and really sees no positives to it. So I don't know exactly where I first came up and heard of the concept of ADHD being a positive thing and actually having advantages over people who don't have ADHD. But I just had this idea rolling around in my mind, so I said, why not go with it? So my final research question ended up being, are there advantages for individuals with ADHD in school, their careers, and in social settings? Next slide, we'll start with the first concept, which is schools. When I started researching schools, a term came up quite frequently called positive psychology. I'm sure anybody who's listening to the presentation probably knows about positive psychology. And an article from the Canadian Psychological Association titled ADHD in Schools, Adopting a Strength-Based Perspective went into a good amount of detail into this positive psychology that I'm talking about. They actually talked about psychology before World War II. Psychology then was focused on alleviating mental illness, enhancing productivity, and building talent. Now, in the current psychological world, a lot of research is being done on how and why people struggle, not so much alleviating. And they go in a lot of work on relieving deficits, not bringing up the positives. So this approach pretty much translates to schools in a modern sense. A lot of it is trying just to alleviate the negative things going on with ADHD and not providing a school system that allows for the positives to be shown. So what are these positives and what are the negatives? So the negatives are trouble with focusing for long periods. A lot of the times they'll get cast aside in school, forgotten, because it just appears that they're not putting in the work or not focusing or being lazy. And memorization. Memorization is such a big part of our school system today, and it's just not something that works for so many people with ADHD. So the positives. It's found that children with ADHD have high levels in logical thinking, emotional intelligence, and very high levels in creativity. So, what conclusion did I come to on how to implement these in schools? Well, I think the thing that's really important is options. I think there needs to be options that play to those strengths. And I'm not saying to take away traditional learning, considering that only 10% of the population has ADHD. But I think there does need to be these options of different areas that these people can investigate to that plays to their strengths. The next area I will go on about is careers. I think careers is pretty much the easiest to see. Kind of similar to schools in an opposite sense, there are so many different options you can go down. And so the thing that I really found is that these 6 pillars that was really brought up by a study coming out of King's College London described them the best. But a lot of different sites and a lot of different academic journals had different ways of putting these 6 pillars. So what are they? They are cognitive dynamism, courage, energy, humanity, and resilience. So yeah, people with ADHD are quite frequently found to have high levels in these areas. So what does that mean? Well, that means that leads to extremely high success rates in areas such as sales, art, any career with a large amount of creativity involved, and so many more careers. So the ADHD, the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, tells the advantages of adding employees with ADHD. Creativity, obviously, I have mentioned before. Hyper focus, actually. It's something that people don't think of, but people with ADHD actually have quite frequent spurts of very high focus, more than the average person will. They're quite frequently good in crisis, intuitive, and quick starters. So social strengths. This was the one that was a little hard for me to research. There was a lot more research done in the other 2 areas for good reason. I think it's the least important, but there still is quite a bit of research. So I think there's a very similar mentality to schools. People are kind of stuck in their trap, like, oh, I have ADHD, I can't flourish. So the Journal of Attention Disorders, the Journal of Attention Disorders published an article titled "Positive Child Personality Factors in Children with ADHD." So what they found is a high level of resiliency. Now, how does that really correlate to being socially aware or strong in a social setting? Well, it just so happens that people with ADHD frequently have above average levels of resilience. And so that is quite explanatory there. I also, going back to the King's College study, members of the study attributed them being social butterflies actually to their ADHD. And considering that there's not a whole lot of research on the subject, I think the best way to get a concrete answer is just personal experience. And if these high functioning individuals are attributing their social success to ADHD, I think right now we have to take their word. And so it also is a pretty much a concrete fact that people with ADHD are quite frequently optimists. And well, it might be quite obvious that being an optimist is a good thing. The King's College study also cited another study in 2000 that actually attributes being an optimist to actually living a physically healthier life. So it may actually be an advantage that ADHD provides people a healthier life. So the major pillars of success. After reviewing all of these 3 areas, which I took a dive into, I wanted to look at what were the major key things that hit on each of them. So personally, I believe that creativity perhaps is the number 1. It really attributes to all 3 areas which I went into. And then resilience, of course, because So many high functioning individuals socially, in school, in work, have high levels of resilience. Optimism, I just explained it. And flexible thinking. This is something I went more into detail in my paper, but flexible thinking is the ability to juggle many different tasks and think fluidly, not be stuck on one thing. So, what was my conclusion after doing all this research? After all my research, I came to the conclusion that yes, there are many, many, many concrete advantages of those with ADHD. However, there are some caveats, including they mostly have to be high functioning, which are most people with ADHD, and they need to learn to embrace their ADHD. And that's what, through this research paper and through this presentation, I want people to realize that it is truly a positive thing only if you embrace it. And so going more into this embracing idea, I just wanted to end with a quote from a book titled The ADHD Advantage: What You Thought Was a Diagnosis May Be Your Greatest Strength. What do David Neeleman, founder of JetBlue, John Chambers, CEO of Cisco, and business mogul Sir Richard Branson have in common? They, along with the singer Pink, Ty Pennington, Adam Levine, and countless other high-profile achievers, have publicly embraced a diagnosis of ADHD, and for good reason. Thank you very much for watching my presentation. Here is my works cited, and I hope you have a great day.